One of the secrets that I think really helped me build my business, I mentioned I was pregnant with my third son, really when the business took off. And it was those like midnight feedings, 4 a.m., I'm up rocking the baby. And I would just connect with people on LinkedIn for hours in the middle of the night. And it's funny to think back, but this was when LinkedIn was just getting started. I maxed out my connection network in probably the first 3 years of being on LinkedIn. And that was my secret. I was like getting this bonus time in the middle of the night. And I'm not saying that people need to, entrepreneurs don't need to be up 24 hours working, but you gotta find these windows of opportunity and seize them.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, a serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7 and 8 figure businesses, as well as a founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. I'm always here to help. Now, today we have another great guest on the podcast, Charlie Saffro. And Charlie graduated from college and went into marketing and advertising, worked for an agency for about 6 years. Husband also graduated college and worked in the transportation industry. And husband later started his own business and then had a baby along the way, went back into the industry that she was working in, decided it wasn't a good fit. Convinced her husband to hire her on his business, and then fell into the recruiting position for a while. Worked with them for about 4 years and grew up from, I think, 8 employees to over 100 employees by the end. Then they sold off the business, and Charlie stayed freelance for a period of time, and then got asked by people on LinkedIn to help find talent. Business went full. That idea and that business went full time. Her first hire was her husband, so it kind of switched around. Husband worked for about 3 years, or left after about 3 years working with her, and continues to work in logistics, transportation, and supply chain and whatnot, recruiting for those industries. So, with that much as introduction, welcome on the podcast, Charlie.
Thanks. I think you covered my life story, so appreciate it.
Well,
I'm happy to be
hey,
here.
if our life stories can be told in 30 seconds, I guess we need to do a few more things before we end or before our lives conclude. So, but,
Exactly.
but with that, I took the much longer journey and condensed it in the 30-second version. So let's go back a bit in time. Tell us how things started with your journey, graduating from college in marketing and advertising.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to take it a step further than what you shared, I fell into the intersection of the industries that I'm in. So, we specialize in recruiting within the supply chain, logistics, and transportation industry. Thinking back, I never even knew recruiting was a career path when I was going through college, and it was never something on my radar. So I fell into that. And then same thing with transportation, supply chain, nothing I ever studied, thought too much about until all of a sudden I was immersed in it. And that has been my life for the last 15, 16 years. So,
So now
um,
I'm gonna force you to go back just a little bit because
okay,
we just jumped over the whole journey and went right to the end, and that misses the whole journey. So
got it.
now we'll go back. So went to marketing and advertising and understood that, maybe hadn't thought about recruiting, didn't even necessarily think about some of the other industries that you work in today. But coming out of school, started working in an agency, and I think you did marketing and design and advertising there. Is that right?
Exactly. I went into the ad agency world. If you know anything about that world, it's a lot of fun, lots of happy hours, cool culture, but it's a grind. And I was paid $18,000 my first year out of college, which I think back and I'm like, I don't even know how I survived on that. And I probably worked 60, 70 hours a week. So it was a great gig at that point in my career. I learned, customer service. I learned how to be resourceful, think outside the box. I worked with a lot of really creative people. But after I had my first child, I did go back after maternity leave, and it was just a bit different being a mom. I didn't have the capacity to burn the midnight oil. I didn't, have the availability to jump on a plane at a moment's notice. So that's when I asked my husband if I could come work for him. So I've always been a worker, never really saw myself as a full-time stay-at-home mom, but I obviously needed to find a better balance. And like you said, my husband went into the transportation industry out of college. maybe 3, 4 years into his career, he had an idea to start a technology that really created efficiencies in the industry. This was early 2000s. So he had an 8-person company at the time. When I decided I was going to resign from my marketing agency, I said, let me come work for you. I'll do marketing. He said, we don't need any marketing. I said, I'll do sales. We don't need a salesperson. I'll get you coffee. I'll staple papers. I don't care. I just need to be around adults. I need to feel, at the end of the day that I did more than just change diapers and baby talk. So his brother was his business partner, and they agreed to let me join their company. And then the night before, my husband, I don't know who he had talked to, but just got cold feet. And he's like, this is really weird, for me to work with my wife, and my friends are going to make fun of me. And I had literally just left a 7-year career behind. And so that was the one night in our marriage where I kicked him out. He slept on the couch. And then the next day I got up and I reported to my new job and just pretended like we never had that conversation. So, and then from there, I really started as a glorified office manager for about a month. And then the timing just was right, where they brought on a partner. They had funding. Their business was in a major, just demanding industry and growth mode. And so that's when they kind of looked around and said, you're the person who has capacity. You need to help us recruit. And this was like Craigslist days. I mean, I was on Craigslist getting resumes. I was posting flyers in libraries and coffee shops. It was like hardcore old school recruiting, which I don't think people even know existed before LinkedIn and Indeed and Career Builder. So I learned the hard way, but I figured it out and helped them grow over 100 people, all industry professionals. So that's how I learned the industry very quickly. And then they sold their business. I finished off a
One
couple.
question on that, because,
Yeah.
and I know it jumps back. So it sounds like your husband was or at least, or his business partner, his brother, were a bit reticent to hire you, and I don't blame him. I have had my wife help me on and off with some of my businesses, and it's always one of those where it can be really great and work out well, or work follows you home, and home follows you to work, and it can be some of those contentions. But it sounds like after initially overcoming that original hurdle, it worked out well, and it was a good relationship. Without putting words in your mouth, is that about right?
No, that's absolutely right. And I mean, my husband's always been my supporter and, believes in me, but I think he really saw how hard of a worker I was when I was adding value to his business. So it's one thing if I'm, gone and working late and bringing home a paycheck for, doing work for someone else. But when it's for your own company, I think he was actually like, wow, I didn't even know you had such work ethic. And when it's for us and our family, and he saw the results, like he really started to appreciate. I mean, he'll be the first one to admit I'm a harder worker than him. I'm more passionate about just my career than him. So it was a good hire on his part. Let's just say that.
That's awesome. No, and I think that's fun. That it's fun to be able to get to work with your spouse as long as you get along with your spouse at work. And so
If
it
it
sounds like
were.
it was a great relationship, and it worked out well. So now you worked with him or convinced him to hire you, got into recruiting, did that. I think you said for about 4 years, and then they're selling off the business. So position kind of goes away as you're doing that, but you stayed on. I think you mentioned you stayed on with the business freelancing for a period of time. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that was my like quarter life crisis, if you will, where, once they decided they were going to sell, I was like, wait, I finally know what I like to do. And what am I going to do now? And so I knew I had a buffer period where I was going to finish off some searches, but I also knew I did not want to go work for this company. I mean, they were in Idaho, they were on site. So it was more of a favor to let me finish these searches as a freelancer. But then I really had a hard time. I was a corporate recruiter, so I was paid a salary. I had goals, I had quotas, but I had a hard time believing that companies would pay a fee just for an introduction. And so, even though I believed in my recruiting skills, once I finished off those projects, I was at that point where I was like, should I just be a mom and should I just stay at home because I had no intentions of starting up my own agency. I just couldn't even come to grips with people will pay for a resume. Like that's all I'm really giving them. But again, my husband kind of encouraged me. He's like, people are reaching out to you, take advantage. And I took on one search. way, undercut what I should have made. I was lowballing every client just to prove to myself that I had a value. But one search led to another and another. And at this time, I was actually pregnant with my third son. And all of a sudden, I was like, I have a legit business here, and I'm either going to grow this and give it 110%, or if I, don't give it my all, it's going to fail. And there's nothing, worse than failure. So that was like my sink or swim moment where I was like, let's do it. Let's get this baby out and get right back to work. And that's really what I've been doing ever since.
Oh, that's fun. And, it is always a bit of a different, everybody thinks they want to be their own boss and they want to do their own thing. And I'm certainly that way and I love it. But it's a much different thing when you're going from a salary and somebody else has to manage the business and, figure out how much they should charge and how much everything should get paid and doing
Yep.
payroll or doing it all. And when you go to that, it's a bit of a scary moment because now there is nobody else in charge. It's you that's in charge and you have to figure out how to make it work. Now, one of the things that you had mentioned is, so, you did that freelancing for a period of time and then transitioned to just doing it full time. Definitely underget, figuring out pricing. Most of the time you want to either charge way too little or way too much. And it usually takes a little while to figure out that timing. But one of the things I also thought was interesting is kind of flipped and now you had your business up and going and you hired your husband. And so how did that conversation go? Because, originally he was kind of hesitant to bring you on. And did he come to you? Did you go to him or how did that work out?
Yeah, it was just the timing, and it just made sense. After he sold his business, he had an employment agreement. So that was a point in his career where he couldn't work in his profession and his trade for, I think, 18 months. And so, he was doing some trading, he was getting involved in real estate deals, but I think that was his quarter life crisis too, where he was like, okay, I worked so hard to sell this business, now it's sold, but now what's my value and where do I go and can I ever work for, a corporation again? So he was keeping busy, but there was a point where I hit a volume of business I couldn't handle. And when I looked around and thought, like, who could I bring on? Who can help me? There was really no one better than him from a background standpoint. He'd been in transportation his whole career. He understood it. He also, is an entrepreneur. He started a business, successfully grew it, sold it. So I can't take credit. Like I had no idea how to, form an LLC or get a bank account, all those little behind the scene things that come with starting a business. That's where he really assisted me. And then as we started to get busier, we were working out of our house at that time and like just shadowing each other all day and started to get a little more involved. But he's always been more behind the scenes. Like I'm the face of the company, if you will. And, during the time he was involved on a daily basis, he had a COO title, but all things, related to legal issues, financial issues, anything technological was his field. So he got us to a point of stability, and then he exited the business strategically. We're still married, everything's great, but he's moving on.
And then exit the business and the marriage, just the business.
Exactly. That's everyone's first question is like, oh, so you got divorced? And no, everything's great. But
Good.
we made the decision that he was going to phase out right before COVID hit. This was like 2019, December, I think. And then obviously COVID hit. We have 3 young boys. So it was like, okay, this is the perfect time for you to support me, but not be, in the grind 40, 50 hours a week with me.
Oh, that makes sense. And I'm sure that is one of the first questions that comes to mind. And, it's good to know that everything is still good within the marriage land and that you guys have both been able to continue to develop your careers and be successful there. And so,
Absolutely.
now that brings us a bit up into where you're at the present. Now you're working primarily doing recruiting for logistics and transportation and supply chain. So kind of within what you're focusing today, if you're to now look forward to the next 6 to 12 months, kind of what's in the plans or what's next in store for you or for you in the business, where do you see things headed?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely will continue to grow and scale from a headcount and a revenue standpoint. There is a huge demand for talent right now. and obviously just a lot of interest in supply chain, like more than I've ever seen. And I think a lot of that was the pandemic. Like people started to really appreciate packages at their doorstep and wonder like, how did this actually get here? Or why is it taking Amazon 4 days instead of the normal 1 day? And so I think that just this intersection of supply chain and talent acquisition, recruiting, has been very generous to us in the last few years. The one thing that we're really focusing on moving forward is getting into some more consulting. And you could probably appreciate this. When you become a subject matter expert, you give a lot of free advice. And whether I did that to prove myself or to get a customer's trust or to help guide a search, we took a hard look about a year ago and we were like, people are paying other consulting firms for the things that we are telling them, and we may never make money off our clients. We're contingent based, so we get paid after the deal is done, if there is a deal done. But along the way, we're helping them understand the market, the compensation plans, the legal side of recruiting and employment agreements. And all that was just free advice. So that's really, I'd say, what the future of our business holds is recruiting will always be our bread and butter and what we're passionate about. But just capitalizing on our data, on our knowledge, on our team of experts, and providing a different type of service that is also very valuable to our clients. So that's where we're headed, and we're tiptoeing, but really starting to believe in it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's a hard one. I end up probably doing the same thing as people ask me a quick legal question. And yeah, I know the answer and I probably give them pretty good advice. And so you
Yeah,
end up giving it away for free. And they're saying, thanks, that answers my question. You're saying, but wait, that took me 20 years of experience to get that information and to know it. And while it's easy to convey, it's not, it's something that you're always trying to balance. And on the one hand, you're saying, hey, I don't want to make it feel like I'm nickel and diming everybody. And I'm, make it so it's so confrontational. They don't want to ask any questions. And yet, on the other hand, you're saying if I give all my advice and my knowledge away for free, then I never make any money off of it, and then I'm losing out on that market. So I get the tiptoeing and kind of finding that balance, and definitely is always one that you have to figure out what works for the business. So it sounds like it'll be an exciting part of the adventure.
yeah, I hope so.
So now with that, so now as we've kind of reached the present day of your journey and even looked a bit into the future, it's a great time to transition to the two questions I always ask at the end of
Yeah.
each episode. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? And what did you learn from it?
So, one thing we didn't touch on was my role at my company for the first 7 or 8 years. And the advice I would give is that if you are an entrepreneur or involved in starting a company, no one will know your business as well as you, and no one will ever be as dedicated as you. And where I maybe didn't believe in myself enough was we've always, up until about 3 years ago, we've always had different executives in the company that we've hired on from the outside. And I stayed as an independent contributor. I love recruiting. I love solving problems, getting my hands dirty. And I understand the value of an entrepreneur needing to be, really in the trenches for the first few years of the business. But I don't know if I just got so busy and went through the motions. I never thought of myself as a leader, or should I be the CEO of my own company? I know that sounds so crazy, but I was a recruiter just like the rest of my team, and that's how I liked it. And we made some hiring mistakes along the way and, trusted people and believed in them from their experience. In the last 3 years, I have escalated my role into, I'm a president is my title. I don't know what I have against a CEO. I'm just, I have this vision that I have to be wearing a suit every day or something if I'm a CEO. So I call myself president. But I've really proved to myself that, like I said, no one knows this business better than me. No one will ever be more passionate than me. So my advice and what I've learned is if you build something, own it. And, don't have that imposter syndrome. Don't believe that someone from the outside can do better than you. I learned it the hard way, but I think it all happened the way it was supposed to. And, it all worked out. So I'd say the last 3 years of my career have by far been the most fulfilling since I've been in this new leadership position for my own company, for my baby.
Awesome. No, that's definitely great to make mistake to learn from, and that definitely sounds like it was a good building block. So second step, or second question, not second step, second question, which is, now if you're talking to someone that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
patience probably and commitment, and kind of bouncing off my last response. Nobody will ever be more dedicated than you, and you just have to find the time. And I hate to think of, quantity of time over quality of work, but one of the secrets that I think really helped me build my business, I mentioned I was pregnant with my third son, really when the business took off. And it was those like midnight feedings, 4 a.m., I'm up rocking the baby, and I would just connect with people on LinkedIn for hours in the middle of the night. And it's funny to think back, but this was when LinkedIn was just getting started. I maxed out my connection network in probably the first 3 years of being on LinkedIn. And that was my secret. I was like getting this bonus time in the middle of the night. And I'm not saying that people need to, entrepreneurs don't need to be up 24 hours working, but you gotta find these windows of opportunity and seize them. And I still have a balance. Like I'm still very present with my kids. I drive carpools, I go to their games, but I put in the time, and that's one thing I will always be proud of, is that I've been committed to this business from day one.
No, I think that's awesome. I think that's definitely a great takeaway. And it is that balance. There have been times where I felt like I've worked 24 hours a day, and other times where you have to take a break and a breather. And I think that one of the things you hit on is, I think, finding those times. I think both finding the time for the business, but also finding the time for the things outside the business, and finding that balance. And it's a hard balance to find, and I think everybody struggles with it, but it's definitely something to learn as you go along. So.
Exactly.
Well, as we wrap up the podcast, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want you to recruit them, they want to have you recruit for them, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
I love it. We are very active on LinkedIn. So if you have any interest in learning about our firm or the industry in general, CS Recruiting, we've got a company page. I have a personal page that's also full of content, or our website, cs-recruiting.com. But everything you said and beyond, we always are looking to connect with like-minded people, talented professionals, and help steer them in the right direction. So that is what we're all about.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, connect, and use a great resource to help build and grow your business. And so, well, with that, thank you again for coming on the podcast, Charlie. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as a listener. Make sure to click subscribe, share, leave us a review, because we want to make sure that everyone finds out about all these awesome episodes. Last but not least, if you ever need help with your patents, your trademarks, or anything else with your startup or small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. We're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Charlie, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thanks so much, Devin.